back, everyone. As you guys can see, today's video is a little bit different. I have my lifelong friend, Michael Graef with me today. We've been kind of creative partners for a long time through a bunch of different scenarios. And we talk about creativity and being creative a lot. One of the things that I have the most struggles with as a creative, and I've struggled with this my whole life, is getting started. And getting started with an idea of actually doing it. I get stuck in that idea phase all the time. And so I thought we'd kind of sit down and talk about some of the ways that we try to combat that so we can actually get our projects going, and using different sort of like baby step techniques to make sure that we're like making sure that we do make the ideas that we have come to life.
An immediate one that jumps out to me is I've put off learning color grading, like proper color grading, for years. And I've always known I need to jump into Resolve, and I need to like actually work on building color up from the ground up. Like I always had ideas. I'd watch tutorials, like I'd experimented looking over people's shoulders, but I hadn't really jumped into it myself until I found myself in a situation where I was forced to get started. And then once I got started, it was really fun and I kept doing it.
Yeah.
And for me, that was directing a music video. It was shot on Red, and Red has its like log, like IPP2 footage. It's like incredibly flat. And so there's no way I was going to be able to do like bare bones color on it. So I was like forced to spend upwards of 60 hours over the course of a couple weeks, like figuring it out. And now I fucking love it. Like I do it. I've been doing this on videos that I'm not getting paid to do it on, just to like practice more.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. That was one technique for me that helped. It was just like, I guess it was accidentally getting forced into doing it,
right.
But maybe finding a way to force yourself into doing it, setting a deadline. I don't know.
So just kind of like jumping off into the deep end of like, instead of like thinking about it, just being forced in a situation where it's like, I have to start learning now. Yeah. And I just have to figure it out as I go, which I feel like is something that we've done a lot in our lives. Like,
like agree to do something and then go, well, I have to figure it out, or it's going to be a spectacular failure.
Exactly. Like, our first business with the parkour gym together. We were just like, we're 17. We are going to incorporate for a business, and we'll see what happens next.
Yeah, it's like, oh, you need to file for an LLC. 17-year-old us is like,
you're like, what's that? Yeah,
what? Like going back like that later that night before high school, the next morning, like, what is an LLC?
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of the like crash course format where it's like.
Yeah, and what I would say is this is probably like the least sustainable, or like least, maybe not the least healthy, but just like it's definitely not like a general good approach for every single way to get started in something.
It definitely can backfire.
It depends on like, I think, your attitude and how you like to approach things.
Yeah.
Because some people need a fire under them to actually get started, but I think there's also a lot of other like easier, way calmer ways that you could decide to start going from like idea phase to actually practicing or learning or doing.
Yeah, totally. And I think that that's kind of the whole point of this video, is like we're laying out a bunch of different ways that we found success in that. And I think that, everyone's different, and you might find that you relate to one of these different things more or less. Do you know what I'm saying? So
we both relate to the like fire under your ass, like figure it out on the way down kind of approach. But what other approaches have worked for you?
When I'm not in that sort of scenario, because some things, like especially more artistic, it's really hard to get forced into that thing. Like no one's gonna be like, make stuff, So when I really want to do something for myself, I get really stuck in that idea phase, and I just keep thinking about it. And I think the thing that really gets me stuck is when I'm like, I'm not sure how I'm going to handle this when it gets there. Like say like I've scripted a video and it's like, how do I want to shoot it? And I'm like, I'm kind of confused on how I want to shoot it. So I'll just put it off. Like I'll think about it some more and not start trying. And so I found that I am someone who needs like really, really small incremental steps, and then I can like take off and start running. But those first steps for any project have to be like baby steps. Like I have to like take it so slow, and then I kind of like, I get excited, and then it starts to make more sense, and I just keep trying.
Give an example of that?
Yeah. So let's take YouTube videos,
okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So like I've wanted to be doing YouTube videos for a long time. I wanted to make a channel. I was like not super sure exactly what kind of videos I wanted to be making, and I wasn't super sure the process of how I wanted to make the videos. And so whenever I think of a video idea, my very, very first steps is I just make a bulleted list on a note, and just like ideas that I have about the video. It doesn't have to have any sort of form, any sort of format. I'll just open a note, even on my phone, and I'll just type out like 4 things. Be like, I want to talk about this. I think this is an interesting thought. I've noticed this in the past, and this. And then I flesh out this, and let me flesh out one paragraph, right? And then I'll flesh out one paragraph of the script. And then once I do that, it's pretty easy to flesh out 2 paragraphs of the script. And then
you're kind of moving.
And then I'm kind of moving. On your exactly. Side. Yeah. And then it's like, now I kind of got this going, and it's pretty easy to like finish the script. And I'm like, oh, cool, the script's finished. Now I want to shoot it. You know, like once it's going, I can go. But it's like getting started is so hard for me. And I think giving myself those like really itty bitty baby steps to just turn it to one is the most important thing for me to go from not making anything to making something.
That's cool. And that seems like a very easy, like gentle on yourself way to go about it. You're not being overly demanding. You're allowed to go at like the easiest possible pace, and then you can kind of turn up the heat as you feel you are ready for it.
Exactly. And I think that this is a much bigger conversation that for another time, but I think that there's a lot of expectation around like making a lot of things, and that becomes very overwhelming, and then I don't want to make anything because I'm too overwhelmed. And I'm someone that, like, when I get really overwhelmed, I just kind of shut down. That's more of like a mental health thing. But so I noticed that I really work well with giving myself like comfort and space to start creating at whatever speed I need to. And I need to have a lot of like positive reinforcement, whether that's external or internal, you know, if I'm creating something
like,
for myself.
So like seeing progress, would that be a type of positive reinforcement, or do you mean something else?
Seeing progress, but like also like being nice to myself, like being like, oh yes, you like got this done.
You did something. So yeah, progress would be some form of that. Then.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
And not being like, oh man, you only got this done today. That like kind of that negative like friction like reinforcement. And I've noticed that I really don't. And so like I really work well when I can see myself doing something good and then getting excited about that and like continuing from there.
Absolutely. For me, that has been kind of like a logarithmic approach to productivity, where in the beginning, the small steps, you're like, hey, you know, small pat on the back, I did something today. Yeah. And then as you do more, they kind of compound, and then you can actually see like, oh, I've actually made progress. And then the momentum kind of gives you like a super big pat on the back, and you're like, oh, hell yeah, let's go.
Totally. Like, you know, obviously like this channel that I've made is pretty new. The first video that I wanted to make was like much harder to get started. Mm-hmm. And it's like each time I go to make a video, it's still kind of like that same like fight, but I found that it's a little bit easier to start those steps each time, right? And eventually that'll like that momentum and like inertia will like keep going, and then I see like I've made all of these things, and like that feels really good, so I want to make more, like and that sort of like positive inertia is like really powerful for me.
That's cool. That's cool. I read something that was like the 2-minute rule, or I would say like a 5-minute rule, where it's like you want to work on something, but you haven't started yet. And so you're like, okay, I'm going to do it every day. But when I do it, I set a timer for 5 minutes. And as soon as that timer's up, I have to stop. So if I'm trying to get better at writing, you know, you write for 5 minutes. As soon as the timer's off, done. You got to close the laptop. That's as much as you can do for the day. And then just do that for a couple weeks. You're still going to make progress. You're building the habit. And then eventually you'll get to a point where you're so sick of having to stop. You're like, all right, I'll just do it.
Yeah.
Whereas I think, at least for me, if I had that big open-ended, like unlimited timeline earlier, I just wouldn't have done it at all.
Exactly.
I wouldn't have the habit, and I wouldn't know where to start. But like just those little, like, I don't know, it's kind of like chipping away at both forming the habit and developing the skill.
I can really relate to that, because I think that with that open-endedness of like, oh man, I really want to start doing this thing, I have these gigantic expectations where it's like, I want to be doing this like an hour every day, and that's so hard to get to. And so then you do 0, only being able to do 5 minutes. And then that's like a rule that you have to stop is interesting, because it doesn't give you that room to like self-doubt. It's not like, why didn't I do more today? I only did 5 minutes. It's like, no, you had to.
Like I checked the box off. Like I did it today.
You weren't allowed to. So there's no room for yourself to be hard on yourself for not doing it because you were forced not to. It's crazy how doing very, very little and having a very tiny amount of progress can actually end up being more progress than just trying to like do a lot at once.
Right. Yeah.
It's really interesting how those like momentum games work. It's like it feels very counterintuitive.
But that's like 30-ish minutes in a week.
Exactly.
And then later you start doing more. And you don't have to do the timer. You just do it until you feel like you want to stop.
And I think like having that familiarity with just like doing the thing makes it then easier to do it again. Take it back to just like creating videos again. I think that getting started is easier because I know what the steps are now. It's like, okay, just like start writing the script. And then like once that's done, like set up, film. Once that's done, you know, rough cut the A roll. Once that's done, rough cut the B, you know, and like I have those steps lined out now. So it's much easier to be like, not have to like fight and process and be like, oh, what do I do now? It's more just like, okay, I know what to do and just do it. And I think that might not work for every single person, but I think there are so many people who get stuck in that, like, I want to do it and I expect so much of myself. If I'm going to do it, I have to do it big. And like,
right.
Starting small, I think is just like one of those things could be really helpful to a lot of people.
Another helpful way for me to like start something that I've done a handful of times is reach out to somebody and like try to like collaborate on a project.
Yeah.
Because then for me, it's like, well, I don't want to let them down.
Right.
And there's an expectation that I'm going to pull my own weight. So I kind of I guess that's similar to the first one where you're like kind of forcing yourself a little bit, but not to the same degree. It's just like a little bit of social accountability. It's just the two of you or the three of you or however many you're working on it. And then you're open to their ideas. So if you feel like you're not bringing your A game, maybe they are.
And I mean, every time I work with someone else on anything creative, I always walk away being like, oh, that's how they do that. That's pretty interesting. And I think that's another like small thing to take away. Be like, oh, that was a cool thing. I'm going to try that. And it gives you like a starting point. It's really hard not to work with people and not find some form of like personal growth unless like the people you're working with are like awful people, which maybe find some new friends. But as long as your friends are like pretty decent people, I think, especially if they're creative, you're going to learn from them. And I think, just like learning from people is really important.
I think a major pitfall to getting started is, at least for me, has been getting stuck in the like being in tutorial, like binge mode. You're learning or you're trying to get like motivated for it. And then you just always stay in that area and you never take any of what you've learned and like actually try it out, practice it. I need to understand a little bit more before I get started. But when you think back to anything you're good at, you never like had a full bird's eye view of how it was all going to work before you started. You just jumped in on something. Like for learning After Effects, I learned one very specific thing I wanted to do that had to have After Effects. And then from there, it's like, well, I know that. And then you just add a little bit more. And the next thing you know, it's like, oh, I kind of understand how the whole software works together now.
And now I can like do things that I don't need. Like instead of having to be like, I need to look this up, it's like, I just kind of know how to use the tools to get where I need to go.
And then your intuition can take in. So you can kind of be creative within the tool set.
Yeah,
which
totally.
Is where you're like, oh, I don't even need YouTube for this. I can just do stuff in After Effects now. That's amazing.
That's why on the board behind you, I have done is better than perfect, because like I also kind of fall into that pitfall of like, well, it's not going to be quite as good as I would hope it would be, so I'm not going to make anything. It's like you literally are never going to get good at something unless you iterate, right? And unless you just like keep trying and keep trying and keep doing it, you're never going to get good at it. So it's just like, make the thing, put it out. Like at some point it's got to be done. It can't be a thing that you're doing forever. And that's kind of like that tutorial mode where it's like, I need to learn that one more thing. I need to like make sure that I know this. And it's like, at some point you just need to like try, put it out, and then try again. And I think that iterating is like a really important step.
It's almost like disregarding like the desire to build a foundation and just starting somewhere.
Exactly.
And then you can kind of, once you're like in it, you kind of can then build out the map. Like,
exactly. But you need a starting point.
You need to start putting more time.
Yeah.
This is definitely like a third hand story, but I thought it was really interesting and it ties in. There's a photography professor who divided his class into like one side had to do like one approach to the semester and the other had to do another. And the two approaches were, one side was going to be graded on one image at the end of the semester. So they had all semester to work on like getting the most perfect image.
Right.
And that would be your letter grade. And then the other half was going to be graded on just the amount of photos that they submitted. And so the more you submitted, the better your grade was. He was just kind of running an experiment. And this is like just like a background assignment that was taking place. What he found was that the people who had taken like the part of the class that took the most photographs also had the best work. Whereas the people who had been like focusing on trying to take and submit the single best photograph they could, like their work was far inferior, and that was just like small practice. And like the other half of the class, they didn't have any expectation on how good their work had to be. They just had to do the work. Right. Like just take some pictures every day. Yeah. And I think I think that ties in nicely.
Yeah. I think that's the entire concept of done is better than perfect. You know, like if you just keep doing it, you will get better.
But just like, I don't know, just daily shooting or shooting a lot more often. It's just like, oh my gosh, practice makes you better than theorizing. You know, it's like getting into the world of doing something instead of just thinking about how to do it. Yeah. You're just going to get better faster that way. You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like theory breaks down after a certain point.
Yeah. Without that actual practice, you aren't a creator. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like you have to create to create. you know. And I mean, I think that also kind of ties into like why some people don't go to school. You know, some people, like, sometimes you have to go to school. You can't just be a doctor, right?
Right.
But there are a lot of, especially creative things that you can do without going to school just by practicing and iterating. Whereas like theorizing in school, like you might get some practice, you might get some different ideas, but you might not have done as much practice as if you'd just been like doing it every day outside of school. And I don't think there's one right approach. I think it's different for everyone. But
I mean, specifically with photography or film, I think practicing first is the best. And then once you're feeling somewhat good about the amount of practice you put in, that's when I think theory is what's really going to help take you to the next level. So I think it has its place. I just think it's good to kind of get your bearings first, and then from there start learning, you know, more rules and more history and more theory.
Yeah.
To help you improve.
Yeah, but that foundation of just doing is just so important. I mean, it's like that's how you get good.
And it's hard to know like what your strengths in that skill are going to be until you start practicing. Or like with making YouTube videos, you don't know in what ways you'll need to focus a lot of your efforts on improving until you've gotten a few videos out, you know?
Yeah. And you're like, oh wow, I'm not very good at this part of this. I need to like work on that. And then it's just going to change and shape itself over time. Like that's how you find your own style. Like the videos I make a year from now are going to be a lot different than I'm making right now. I hope that some of these ideas maybe help you get going if it's something that you're struggling with, because that's something that I've always had a really hard time with. And like I feel really relieved and I like a weight lifted off of me, kind of having a better idea of how to grasp these concepts and how to handle them instead of just being like swimming in my head all the time. So yeah, I hope you get something out of this. Definitely check out Michael's channels. His like socials will all be linked below. Thanks so much for joining me. Is there anything else you want to say?
No, that's about it. I think
Cool.
It wraps it up nicely.
Awesome. Well, thanks for watching. We'll see you later. Peace.
There's a photography professor.
Professor. Is there a photography professor? Have you ever heard of Ansel Adams?
God damn it, dude. Yeah, there's a photography professor. God damn it, dude.
All right.